There are a lot of manufacturers focusing on larger electric vehicles, so it's actually quite refreshing to see a smaller one come into the market. It's called the GWM Ora Funky Cat. It's produced by the Chinese automaker Great Wall Motors, in other words GWM, and it comes in at roughly £32,000 for the first edition model. That is feature packed, and we'll touch upon this further down in this video. If you want some further details about what you get in this variant, do check out our written review that can be found down in the description below, or indeed in the pinned comment. Now, to kick off this video, let's talk about its electric range. And here, at least at the time of filming and in the UK, it's available as a 48 kilowatt hour battery pack model. We point this out because in other markets it's also being launched as a larger battery pack variant as well. Now, nonetheless, given that we are in the UK and driving the vehicle, the manufacturer claims you should be able to get around 200 miles from the smaller battery. Now, in our own mixed driving test, we netted 140 to 160 miles, which isn't too bad and somewhat in the middle of what you should expect in comparison to its competitors. So let's put it into perspective. This is better than the likes of the Mini Electric and trounces the likes of the Honda E. However, it's on par with the Vauxhall Corsa E, the Peugeot E208, and the Seat Mi Electric and the VW E-Up. The latter two are discontinued now, but worthwhile having them as reference points. Now, as for its more comparable rivals, the VW ID.3 and the Cupra Born achieve north of 220 miles, while the Renault Zoe and the Nissan Leaf, at least the Tecna E+, achieve roughly 200 miles, while the MG4 EV hits north of 230 miles. So it's worthwhile considering here that some of the alternatives out there on the market actually do better when it comes to the all-electric range. Now, for you to be as efficient as possible and to retain energy back into the battery pack, you'll want to enable one of the regenerative braking modes, which you can select through the infotainment system. Unfortunately, these are not linked with the drive modes, such as, let's say, Eco, Normal or Sport modes, and therefore means that they're a somewhat global setting. Now, on that note as well, there is a single pedal mode as well that you can select through the infotainment system, and this really allows for true one pedal driving. In other words, you can lift off from the accelerator pedal and come to a complete standstill, which is very handy for those somewhat mundane city commutes. However, it's worth considering that when you do enable single pedal mode, it effectively overwrites any of the driving modes that you might be in. In other words, over here, if you're on, let's say, the normal preset and you enable single pedal mode, your normal preset will no longer appear through your instrument cluster, which we did find somewhat fascinating. So much so that we reached out to Ora, and if we get any sort of updates, we'll post it down in the description below. Now, of course, if you want to retain energy at a much more rapid rate, you can plug it in. And here, the CCS port supports up to 64 kilowatts of input. So therefore, if you find an appropriate charger, you can go from 15 to 80% in around 42 minutes. Now, the vehicle does also come fitted as standard with an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, and as such means that if you find a 3-phase power supply, or if you've got it fitted at home or at a workplace, it'll take you roughly 3 hours and 20 minutes to attain 80% charge. Now, if you are limited to 7 kilowatts, which is of course a lot more common, then it will take you roughly 5.5 hours. And unsurprisingly, it will take a lot longer if you are limited to a 3-pin socket only. So moving swiftly on, we get onto performance, and here the vehicle has a singular motor that dispatches 126 kilowatts of power, and that equates to 169 horsepower. There is 250 Newton meters of readily available torque. Now, we had it tested from 0 to 60 miles an hour using Race Logic's VBox Sport at 7.37 seconds, which is certainly faster than the manufacturer's 8.3 second claim. The top speed is capped, however, at 99 miles an hour, but that's pretty much in line with a lot of its competitors. Now, the vehicle's straight line speed will certainly suffice for a lot of individuals, and it certainly feels nimble in and around town, although it's worth considering that it's operating a front-wheel drive system, and therefore, in comparison to rear-wheel drive alternatives, such as the likes of the Honda E, the VW ID.3, the Cupra Born, or indeed the MG4 EV, it's not quite up to par. In other words, doesn't give you the same sort of driver's input or that handling characteristics as its rear-wheel drive alternatives, and equally doesn't give you the same level of confidence when you're cornering at speed on windy country roads. Now, we would like to point out that despite operating on a front-wheel drive configuration, the vehicle doesn't suffer from any sort of torque steer or indeed any sort of front wheel spin, which is something that we did notice on the likes of the MG ZSEV and the Hyundai Kona Electric, both of which are SUVs, so that is worth considering, but it's just something that we'd like to point out and potentially put your mind at rest. Now, elsewhere, in terms of its suspension setup, we feel it's been done to perfection. It soaks up anomalies, potholes and speed bumps when you're pottering it around town, and also doesn't suffer from much body lean when you're going around windy country roads. Indeed, it just feels to be just tuned to perfection, and given the overall body shape, it certainly should be commended as to what the manufacturer has actually achieved. Now, what also constitutes in having a good driving experience is low cabin noise, and thankfully that is the case with the Ora Funky Cat. Here there is very little noise that can be heard when it comes to traversing rougher terrain, and equally when it comes to driving at higher speeds, whereby there's very little wind noise that can be heard deflecting off the A-pillars. Furthermore, what is similarly impressive is the 6-speaker audio system that's comprised within the first edition model. There's speakers found within each of the 4 doors and also tweeters within the A-pillars. The combination results in a pretty lively and exciting sound signature, specifically if you enable the DTS option through the infotainment system. Without it, however, it will sound a little bit dull, although will give you the ability to EQ it to your heart's content. Now, for you to play back your favourite tracks, you want to connect up to the infotainment system, and here you've got Bluetooth, whereby the SBC and AAC codecs are supported only. Elsewhere, you have got USB playback, not only for music files but also movie files. Now, if you don't want to connect up your smartphone, you do have the ability to go via the music streaming services that are available via the infotainment system, and here, for example, Deezer is supported, therefore giving you high resolution playback straight from the display itself. Now, it's worth considering that at the time of filming, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are not currently supported, be it in a wired or wireless format. Although we've been assured by the manufacturer that it's due to come in Q1 to Q2 of 2023. And as soon as it does, we'll post an update down in the description below. Now, this does perfectly bring us onto technology within the cabin, and here there are 2 10.25-inch displays, one of which is for your infotainment and the other is for your instrument cluster. Both of them are vivid, somewhat customizable and also intuitively laid out. Better still, the buttons that are found on the steering wheel allow you to adjust each screen independently, in other words, while you're driving, so therefore you don't have to even take your hands off the wheel. It's a very smart and indeed great integration by the manufacturer. Better still, the main infotainment system does support multi-touch input and is also intuitively laid out, so therefore it's very easy to find the right settings. Now, on that note over here, there's 2 customizable buttons that can be found on the steering wheel, both of which can be adjusted independently, although right now at the time of filming the options are pretty limited. We have been again told by the manufacturer that there's a plethora of different options that will be integrated in the future, so it's worth considering that this vehicle does support OTA firmware updates. Now, aside from this, the manufacturer is really trying to push out the boat when it comes to its technology implementation, at least within the cabin. And here there's a facial recognition system, and there's a small little box found towards the driver's side A-pillar. This effectively automatically switches the driver profile depending on who is sat in the driver's seat. This can be quite handy if you're sharing your vehicle with your partner or of course your friends, although bearing in mind they'll want to be insured before driving off. Now, on the flip side, it is slightly a shame not to see a head-up display integrated, be it as an option or indeed standard. So moving swiftly on, we get onto its interior design, and here it's absolutely sublime throughout the cabin. The stitching work, upholstery, the choice of materials and even the layout all should be really commended. So much so that we'll say it's class leading in comparison to all of its rivals that come in at a similar price point. Better still, it's still very practical, whereby there's a few physical buttons found towards the dashboard and also towards the center console, and also the steering buttons indeed are actual physical controls. In other words, they're not haptic or touch sensitive buttons despite their appearances. Now, the choice of materials within the cabin are not only good to look at and feel, but also to be sat in. Indeed, the 4 main seats are all very accommodating and also comfortable. Better still, the front 2 seats have got electronic adjustments as standard. Now, at the rear of the cabin, the rear middle seat is unsurprisingly a little bit stiffer, although the emission of a transmission tunnel means that they can be left without too much discomfort. Furthermore, if there's no rear middle occupant, you can reveal an armrest and also 2 cup holders. Now this does bring us on to the subject of headroom and legroom, and here the rear outer occupants will feel a little bit hard on their quad muscles, at least if you're sat in a very upright position. However, if you do stretch out your legs or specifically widen them, then it will be a non-issue, and that's namely due to the placement of the battery pack and the positioning of the seats, which are a little bit diagonally wedged. As for headroom, it's not too bad. Of course, it won't compete with larger size vehicles out of the market, but should suffice for most individuals. There's of course no problems whatsoever at the front of the cabin, both in terms of headroom and legroom, and that's coming from someone who's just under 6 foot. Now that's all well and good, but what about when it comes to storage? Well, at the rear you have got those 2 cup holders, and then you've got the rear door bins, which are pretty limited. Then you've got these areas found behind the rear portion of the front seats. Now at the front of the cabin it's a lot better. You've got the glove compartment, and then you've got the door bins, which can accommodate a 500ml bottle. Now it's worth bearing in mind that the frequent access of a 500ml bottle might be a little bit tricky due to the somewhat tight nature of it. Now, as for the center console, there's a small little area found at the front for your loose change or, for example, cards. Then you've got 2 cup holders, a wireless phone charger, which by the way comes in as standard, and then also the center armrest compartment, which is actually surprisingly deep and therefore should accommodate a small to medium sized purse or of course a wallet. Now for larger items, you'll want to place them in the boot, and here you've got 228 litres, and with the seats propped down you've got 858 litres. Now that's larger than the likes of the Smart EQ42, the Fiat 500 electric or the Honda E, and it's similar to the Mini electric, although it is smaller than the MG4 EV, the Renault Zoe, the VW ID.3, the Cupra Born, and of course the Nissan Leaf. Now I'd like to point out, however, that there is an underfloor compartment which is handy for your charging cables, and then there's a 60/40 rear split folding seat design with no through loading capabilities. Now despite being a fully electric vehicle, there's also no front storage space either. Now this does bring us onto its exterior design, and of course it's a very subjective matter, so do let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What we'll say is that it very much stands out in comparison to rival offerings. Now it's available in different finishes: Aurora Green, Mars Red, Starry Black and Nebula Green, although it's worth considering that the metallic paint finishes will cost you an extra £595, while the metallic paint finishes with a 2-tone finish will cost you £795. Now the vehicle comes fitted as standard with 18-inch alloys, and despite its appearances, it's actually similar in terms of dimensions to the Cupra Born and the VW ID.3. Now the vehicle's exterior design is certainly alluring, but it's also very practical, and by that we mean it scored 5 out of 5 stars on Euro NCAP's rigorous crash tests. Indeed, over here it scores well across the board, but certainly excels when it comes to its safety assistance systems. And stepping in the vehicle, we can certainly say that the ADAS systems are absolutely spectacular. You have got adaptive cruise control with stop and go technology, which works extremely well in terms of regulating the distance between you and the leading vehicle, and also doesn't feel sort of jittery like you'd find on some rival offerings. Then you've got lane mitigation and departure assist, and also lane centering with steering assist. You've got traffic jam assist and also junction assist, and then you've got blind spot monitoring system. Now just to add the cherry on top, you've got rear cross traffic alert as well, with fantastic 360-degree resolution cameras, which gives you a little indication when you're getting close to, for example, an object. Now this actually brings us on to visibility and parking, and here at the front and the side we've got no issues whatsoever. It's very easy to peer over the bonnet. The rear view mirror is in a good position, at least for us. Then there's a small little cutout from the front mirror triangle, and then as for the side, it's easy to check over for your blind spot, and also given the fact that you've got blind spot monitoring, it bolsters the overall capabilities of you not turning into someone. And then while the rear view visibility is a little bit limited, you have got these parking sensors and the 360-degree cameras to really aid you when it comes to doing a complex parking maneuver. Frankly, we've got no complaints whatsoever in this department, and Ora should really be commended for the plethora of different driver assistance systems that they've included as standard in the Funky Cat. So with all of that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict of the GWM Ora Funky Cat. And here there's a lot going for it. It's very stylish and certainly stands out in comparison to some of its competitors. It's It's pretty nimble and fun to drive, has got a decent electric range, albeit not class leading, and furthermore is competitively priced at £32,000. And as a result, we can definitely see ourselves recommending it. However, it is worth considering that there's some other alternatives out there on the market, from the likes of the Nissan Leaf, the Renault Zoe, the Cupra Born, the VW ID.3, and of course the MG4 EV, all of which we've reviewed, and they will be down in the description below. Now, we'd be intrigued to know which vehicle you would pick if you had the money to buy it, and as to why you would actually pick it. Now, if you've liked this detailed, independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing, and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated and allows us to continue delivering honest reviews like this one. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.